Yo, welcome back to LCS Garage. Today we are going to be upgrading the entire brake system of the Miata. That's going to be a couple different things. I'm going to be doing pads, I'm going to be doing rotors all around. I'm going to be upgrading to the stainless steel brake lines, and I might even give it a little paint job to make everything look really nice. So let's go ahead and see what we need. First things first, you need some floor jacks and some jack stands. Apparently, like most of us home garage mechanics, we go to Harbor Freight and get these Pittsburgh jack stands, and there was just a recall on them because apparently they can just suddenly collapse and kill me. So that's not good. So that's why I have my jacks on either side. I have the rear one behind the rear diff, and I have the front one right tucked up under the front subframe. Like always, we shall make a list of everything that we need. So again, we'll always use our breaker bar, torque wrench for later, gloves, assorted sockets and wrenches. I think for the most part we'll be using a 10 and a 14. I'm going to be adjusting the height of my coilovers too, so I have my little coilover wrench. You'll need an Allen key, and I believe it's a 4mm. For the painting process, you need some sandpaper. I'll be using a 200 and a 400 grit. To get all the bolts off, I'll be using PB Blaster or WD-40 or both. Cleaning everything down with brake cleaning. I'll prime it first with this high heat primer. I'll paint it. I'm going to do gold to match my valve cover. I use the engine one. It's probably overkill, but anything that's high heat. So this one's rated up to 650 Fahrenheit. For maybe like the control arms, if they're looking kind of janky, I might just jazz them up with some chassis paint. And other than that, you'll need some brake grease as well. This is like it's a grease, but it's meant for higher temperatures. I always like to have some shop towels. And then for the bling, let's see what we're working with. All around, I got we'll see them better later, but the Hawk Talon rotors. These are drilled and slotted. And honestly, you really don't need these. Hawk just had a pretty big sale. It's I think their coupon code is 40 Spring 2020, all one thing, like 40 Spring 2020, and it was like 40% off, and then every $100 you get like a $10 rebate. So it's like almost a 50 or 60% off, which is awesome. I like their products. I've used only their brake pads in the past. So we have Hawk DTC 60s because I have good experience with them, rotors front and back, and these are our upgraded stainless steel brake lines. And then instead of going expensive, I'm going to try out something new. I've heard a lot of good things about this. This is the Castrol .4 brake fluid. So I currently have Motul 660 in it right now, and it's like $28 a bottle. This stuff is less than $4 a bottle. And I know you get what you pay for, yada, 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 but I don't know. I just want to test it out. It's so cheap, and to change out brake fluid is like pretty easy. So I don't know, might as well give it a try. Again, balling on a budget. So I've never done this before. I've never changed rotors before. I've never done brake lines. I don't think I've really painted anything properly. I don't think this is gonna be proper, but I don't know. It should be fun. You can join me along this crazy process and see everything that I'm messing up on. So stay tuned. All right, first things first, let's get our wheel off. I've already loosened the lug nuts while the car was on the ground, so that way I can basically just undo them with my hands now. Easy enough. All right, now we're gonna focus on basically two different sizes of bolts. When you are going to the caliper, first you have this guy right here. This is a little plastic covering. This pops off, and there is a 10 mil there. Other than that, the important one, I don't know if you can see. I'll try to focus this light. But you see the bracket, and right next to the bracket there's two 14s. You're gonna get the inside one. And again, I don't know if you can see, but it's right here where my finger's pointing. So I got the 14 out. Again, I'm probably not even getting the proper angle for you, but the 14 is out, and it's a really short bolt. It looks just like this, and it's basically a cap, because what's behind it is this little guy. And this little guy is what we're going to take our 4mm Allen key in. So basically, if you're looking at the rotor, this is basically facing you. You're twisting it out, and you pop this out. And the way you can pop it out really is it's pretty simple. If if you're twisting and it's not going anywhere, like you're twisting, you just kind of jam it in there, put some leverage on it, and then wiggle it out like that, and it just pops right out. So the next thing is just to get this little 10mm, and this whole assembly will pop off. There we go. So it's a pin, which looks just like this. And now that that's popped off, this whole thing should slide up. Yep, just like that. And if you want to take it completely off, it's just sitting on a pin now, so you're going to rotate inwards. See this little top one here with the rubber? That's also a pin. So once you slide it up, you just slide it all the way off and it'll come off. I'm gonna get a zip tie because I don't want it dangling on the brake line. I'm just gonna tie it up here. Pretty simple, guys. All right, so I took the assembly off. Again, it just slides up and then towards the car. And as you can see, this is the pin. This little black thing, this is the pin that it slides on. That's what holds it in place. If you were just changing your brake pads, this is all you need to do. As you can tell, your pads are exposed. You take off these little clips, top and bottom, you just pinch them together, and then these things slide right out, inside and outside. And because we're gonna take off and change the rotors, we have to take off the assembly that holds this in place. And that is just two, where are they? Oh yeah, right here, 1 and 2. There's just two 14mm that hold this whole thing in place. If I take that off, I can just take the whole assembly off. Both 14mm are out, as you can see here. They are the same size, I believe, so you don't have to worry about which one's top, which one's bottom. And now this whole thing should, keyword should, just pop right out. I got really lucky. I didn't even have to use a breaker bar. Everything just kind of popped out pretty nicely. Yep, there you go. That's your whole assembly. So if we look at it on the ground here, you can tell you have your inner and your outer pads. You have the pin that it slides on. You have these little clips at the top and bottom. So what I'm going to do now is pop these pads off. Again, they just slide right off, left side, right side. I'm gonna take a wire brush, clean all this up, maybe even paint them, and then change out the pads. Meanwhile, while I'm here, this allows the rotor to be fully, I guess, free floating. So you can either take a hammer or just like hit it with your hand, give it a little shake. I guess the shake isn't gonna work, so I'll take a hammer, I'll knock around the corners, that'll knock it loose, and then I can pop my rotor off to change it. Guys, so easy. Took my little rubber hammer, gave a couple taps around, boom, the rotor's off. So honestly, I mean, this is as simple as it gets. It took probably about 5 minutes to get off the caliper and the rotor. So if I were just to put a direct placement on, I would pop in my new rotor, make sure everything is greased, slide it back on. But I just want to kind of freshen up everything. I want to, while I'm in here, I want to wire wheel everything down, grease everything up. This is just kind of looking crusty, so I want to sand this up and paint it nice and black. And even I want to paint my caliper setup too. So let's go ahead, do that, and take a look at what it looks like. It looks so good. Check it out. I cleaned everything with my sandpaper. I started with 200 and went to 400. I did it a bunch of times. I ended up brake cleaning basically everything. I wiped everything down with some shop rags. I started with the primer. I did about 2 coats of that, let everything sit, and then I jumped to this metallic, the VHT gold paint, and this is where I'm at right now. So as you can see, everything is disassembled. I have that part of the caliper sitting. It looks so cool. And the rest of it's sitting right there. And everything else is just kind of cleaned up. I took the control arms, I sanded them, I painted everything black. I made sure to wrap up the coilover to not to get any overspray on them. and I wire wheeled the hub, so this is all looking fresh, but I really couldn't be happier. I love things that are clean. So now that everything is painted, I'm just gonna let everything dry, grease everything up, assemble it, and I'll show you the finished product. Guys, it's been some time, and this thing is just looking great. I absolutely love the way it looks, the drilled and slotted rotors, painted gold. I still haven't done the brake lines yet. I adjusted my coilovers, and I basically got the both sides of the rear done. Boom, it's so shiny, it's so good. It matches the valve cover. And I'm working on the fronts right now, and the fronts are almost exactly like the backs, where you know, it's just a couple bolts, you pop it off and the whole assembly kind of comes off, but I'll go ahead and walk you through it on the other side. Okie dokie. So for the fronts, again, really similar. We have the wheel off, and now we are going to take off this top one right here. This is a 14, and you actually don't have to take the bottom one because that's a pin. So let's take this one off, and this assembly should slide out. 2 seconds later, we got the pin out. So now this should just, yeah, kind of bend out. Let's try to see what we can work with here. There we go. And once you have it here, you literally just slide it out. Boom, this is all separate. We can tuck this up here for now. And in order to get this assembly off, which again, if you weren't doing the rotors, you can just stop here and take off the pads. But there are, boom, 2 14s right back here. Let's chuck those off and get this assembly off. We are cruising now. Just a couple minutes later, I have the assembly off, and it is right here. And it's just a good idea to keep in mind, like, the orientation of everything. So again, we popped it off just like that. You can see both pads here, which slide out. And let's see. So the pads just pop out from the sides. All right, easy enough. And then because I'm going to be cleaning this, I'm going to be taking off these pins. So there's 4 pins, as you saw one just fall down. And there's only one way for them to go. You know, the tabs go on the outside. And they just go groove to groove. And they just slide right in. So keep in mind, so there's 4 tabs, 1 for each corner, these holding the pads. So I'm going to place them on the ground in the position that I took them off in. Boom, just like that. So now I'm just left with a bare caliper. I'm going to basically wire wheel this down, sand it, and prep it for paint. So this is kind of work on the other side right now. While that's drying, the paint is drying, I've just been going back and forth because the longest process is honestly waiting for the paint to dry. So meanwhile, I've sanded everything. I have dropped some paint on the control arms just to make everything look kind of fresh. Obviously, I wrapped up the coilover to make sure no overspray gets on that. And I just put my first coat of primer on the caliper. So that's the side that's attached. This is the side that we took off. So I'm going to do 2 more coats of primer, and I'm going to basically alternate from side to side. So while I put the second coat of primer here, I'll go put on the first coat of primer on the other side, keep going back and forth so that way we can minimize our waiting time. With the brakes all wrapped up, I'm going to do the braided brake lines. So I did this first side here, and it's actually like really easy. It attaches on obviously 2 different parts here on the caliper. This is a 12, I believe, and then over here there is when you take off the original one, you'll need this thing. It's called a flare hex nut wrench or flare wrench. I don't know, something like that. It's important to use this apparently because otherwise it's pretty easy to strip. But from the back side of this, there's a metal clip. You pop that off. you undo the little bolt there, and then this whole line pops right off and you put the new one in. So going over to the other side, because this is the rear brake, I'm gonna do it now. So as you can tell, it's still on. The main brake line actually comes to this right rear, the passenger rear. So it looks like this little box, this little complicated box thing, but same concept. You're gonna use your flare, whatever, 10 mil, hit up the bolt on the side, the bolt on the top. These are two little 10 mils. This whole assembly comes off. And again, from right here, this one attaches at the caliper, that's a 12. So that whole thing gets replaced with the new stainless line. So let's go ahead and get that rolling. We finally got everything done on all four corners. New rotors, pads, painted the calipers gold, adjusted the height of my coilovers, and we got some braided lines all around. So I know I didn't really walk through the how-to. Honestly, I just kind of got frustrated. A lot of the bolts, like these on the back, these little 10 millimeter, the flare nut, whoever had this car before completely stripped it. So I had to use vice grips and PB Blaster. It was a bad time. But these are the backs. This is the front. Oof, I mean, it looks so goddamn good. So, only one thing left to do, and that is to bleed the brakes. It's so easy to do. There's already a little built-in bleeder valve right there on all the calipers. So I have like a little tube thing here. Honestly, you can use any bottle and tube. I just got this from Advanced Auto, and there's like different nipple sizes, so you can, you know, pop it into your different cars. It just makes this whole process a lot less messy. And the way it'll work basically is I will pop this little guy on like so. I'll loosen the valve. I'll have a little helper pump the brakes. Meanwhile, I'll have this slightly open and I'll fill it full of the new fluid. And we are going to go from there. I'm not going to film the whole process because it's just kind of tedious. But yeah, man, I'm tired. This car kicked my butt today.
Welcome back. It's Sire from the future, and let me tell you a little frustrating story. As you've been watching along, process has been going super smooth, right? Took everything off, spent some time cleaning everything, brakes look sick, finally done. The last step of the process is to bleed the brakes. So, what do? Get my little 8 mil, I go to the little bleeder valve, go to turn it, little thing pops off. It popped off. The stupid thing broke. I had no idea what to do. I mean, I could try to extract the bolt, but it's like my brakes. I've never extracted a bolt before. I felt very defeated. So I ended up going on the marketplace on Facebook, and I found this guy named Hunter. I made a deal on some rear brakes because it broke on 2 different ones. I made sure to check all of them after that. Both of my rear brakes broke, just the bleeder valves. So now I finally got those brakes in. I'm not gonna film anything because it's all repetitive, but I have to take out those brakes, wire wheel them, prime them, paint them, and basically get the same exact thing set up here. This car sucks, dude. It was the last step. Everything has to break on the last step. But I'm gonna go start that process, and then we're gonna bleed the brakes. And I found out actually that you bleed the brakes in an interesting order. I thought, like, you go from the furthest to closest, and I thought the furthest would be the passenger rear, but it's actually the driver's rear from how the brake lines kind of go around. So it's counterclockwise, and driver rear, passenger front, driver front. But let me freaking paint these stupid things and get them all prepped and go from there.
Guys, we have done it. Brakes all around, all 4, all gold, all new. Oh my gosh, it feels like forever. Again, putting the new ones on were a piece of cake. Bleeding the brakes really took no time at all. If you guys haven't done it before, on each little caliper there is a little bleeder valve right here. So again, it really helps if you have a buddy. But you loosen the valve. It's an 8 mil. and then you pump the brakes. You see the brake fluid squirting out, and at that time, you just make sure there's no air bubbles and all that old fluid is out of there. Mine was actually pretty crusty, and then as soon as it is coming out nice and clear with that new brake fluid, you hold the brake pedal, you tighten her up, and then you move on to the next one. So that's what we did, and finally it's done. So now I'm going to go take a test drive around the neighborhood and break in the new rotors and pads, and that's basically going to be me driving up to 40 miles an hour, slowing down to 20, driving to 60, slowing down to 20, doing that a bunch of times just to, set everything in. But I couldn't be happier. Again, this is not even a performance mod, really. It's just like a safety thing and a bling mod, I guess. But it took forever, and I'm happy it's over with. So I shall see you in the next one. Thank you for tuning in. And I think the next episode, I'm going to try to make an experiment.